In this video, we will talk about motor disorders. And what I mean by disorders is disorders affecting somehow your skeletal muscles, your voluntary muscles. We'll be comparing upper motor neuron lesions to lower motor neuron lesions and what each of these mean. In order to understand upper and lower motor neuron lesions, we must recap the motor pathways, looking at the pyramidal system, which is the system of voluntary movement. Normal motor function depends on the transmission of signals from the brain to brainstem or spinal cord by the upper motor neurons, and then from there to skeletal muscles by lower motor neurons. Here is a cross-section of the primary motor cortex of the brain. The outer gray matter of the cortex have areas where neurons arise from, which are associated to a particular area in the body, so the feet, hands, and the face. The white matter consists mainly of neurons' axons, which travel through the brain. Motor neurons will pass through the internal capsule situated near the thalamus and basal ganglia. Here is the brainstem, which is made up of three parts: the midbrain. Important area here is the red nucleus and crus cerebri, and the pons, not drawn, as well as the medulla oblongata here. Here is a cross-section of the spinal cord where the communication between upper and lower motor neurons occur. We will learn about this soon. The spinal cord have tracts, which are where neurons travel through. Important tracts in the pyramidal system are the lateral corticospinal tract and the anterior corticospinal tracts. The target organ of the motor neurons are the skeletal muscle cells. Let's create a scenario where we want to move our right thumb. The upper motor neurons arise from the left primary motor cortex, pass through the internal capsule, through the brainstem, passing the crus cerebri, passing through the pons, and then passing through the medulla, the area called the pyramids. Hence, it's called the pyramidal system. The vast majority of upper motor neurons that project from the motor cortex to the spinal cord are contained in the lateral corticospinal tract. The neurons that will travel through the lateral corticospinal tracts will cross over at the medulla of the brainstem. Once the upper motor neurons reaches the correct spinal level, it will synapse with the lower motor neurons at the anterior horn of the spinal cord. The lower motor neurons will then target the skeletal muscles responsible for movement of that body part involved. So in this scenario, it is the muscles involved in the right thumb movement. Majority of upper motor neurons are contained, as mentioned, in the lateral corticospinal tract. However, there are those that project to the proximal muscles, and these have axons that do not cross over at the medulla, but actually travel in the anterior corticospinal tract in the spinal cord. Axons of the anterior corticospinal tract will cross over when they reach the level of the spinal cord, where they will form synapses with the lower motor neurons. Hope that all made sense. Now it's important to realize two things here. The first is the general rule in which motor neurons activated on one side of the brain will control movement of the opposite side of the body. Second thing to remember is that the spinal motor tracts we discussed are under voluntary control. There is another motor tract which is also under voluntary control, called the rubrospinal tract. Now, the rubrospinal tract originates in the red nucleus of the midbrain. It decussates and then descends in the lateral aspect of the spinal cord, where it will synapse with a lower motor neuron. The rubrospinal tract targets lower motor neurons, which facilitates in muscle flexion and inhibits neurons in muscle extension. Now, in summary, the upper motor neuron transmits information from the brain to the spinal cord or the brainstem. Lower motor neurons transmit information from the brainstem or spinal cord to the skeletal muscles. Clinical findings on examination can indicate whether a motor disorder is due to an upper or a lower motor neuron lesion. However,